I didn't expect the nausea. It came without warning, sharp, sudden, like a wave crashing against a quiet shore. One moment, I was asleep under the weight of the October morning, and the next, I was sitting up in bed with my hand clamped over my mouth, heart racing. The room was still dim, the kind of dusky gray that happens when the sun hasn't fully committed to rising. Through the half-drawn curtains, a sliver of light slipped in and painted the edges of our bedroom in soft shadow. It was 6:47 a.m. on a Saturday. Next to me, Daniel slept soundly, curled on his side with one arm tucked beneath the pillow, his breathing steady and familiar. For a moment, I simply watched him. His hair was mussed, his brow relaxed. There was nothing unusual in that, but everything in me felt different. My body was humming with something I couldn't name yet, or maybe I could, and I was too afraid to say it out loud. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, one foot, then the other, toes curling against the cold hardwood floor. The nausea had passed, but a different sensation remained, a strange flutter just below my ribs, like a whisper from within. I stood by the bed for a few seconds, hands resting gently on my belly. My fingers trembled slightly. For years, that's how long we'd been trying. 4 long, aching years of hope and heartbreak, of doctor visits and temperature charts, of herbal teas recommended by my mother-in-law and expensive vitamins that promised miracles, of Daniel squeezing my hand in waiting rooms, of me crying in the bathroom every month like clockwork. I had memorized every line of my cycle like a script, and yet something about this morning felt unscripted. The bathroom mirror greeted me with a pale reflection, dark circles under my eyes from a restless night, a slight sheen of sweat on my forehead. I splashed cold water on my face, not because I needed to wake up, but because I needed something solid, something real. It was then that the thought fully formed. A single possibility, so fragile it felt like holding a bird in my palm. Could it be? After all this time? I didn't wait. I didn't want to think too much. The pharmacy across the street opened at 7:30. I threw on a pair of jeans and an old sweatshirt, tied my hair back, and wrapped a scarf around my neck. No makeup, no purse. I tucked my wallet into my back pocket and closed the door behind me without a sound. The pharmacist, an older woman with silver hair and a thick Boston accent, gave me a curious glance. "Morning, Anna. You all right, hon? You look a little rattled." I hesitated for a moment, then leaned in. "I need a pregnancy test," I whispered. Her eyes softened instantly. "Oh, sweetheart. God willing. The digital ones are best, more accurate. Bit pricey, though." "I'll take the digital," I said without pause. Back home, I sat on the edge of the tub, heart pounding like it might leap from my chest. I couldn't look. Not yet. I counted every breath like a prayer. And then I did. One line, the control. And then, slowly, a second faint line began to appear. Ghostly at first, then steady, undeniable. 2 lines. My hand flew to my mouth. Tears welled in my eyes before I even realized I was crying. I held the test against my chest like it was a sacred relic. After everything, after all the heartbreak, all the waiting, all the nights I had convinced myself it would never happen had. "Thank you," I whispered to no one. "Thank you." Behind me, from the bedroom, I heard the creak of the bed. Daniel was waking up. I quickly wrapped the test in tissue and tucked it into the pocket of my robe. I wasn't ready to tell him yet. Not here, not now, not like this. This was something I wanted to give him. Properly. Later tonight, when the candles were lit and the dishes were cleared and the house had quieted from birthday laughter, it would be his surprise, his gift, ours. He didn't know yet, but everything was about to change. By the time Daniel walked into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes and yawning, I was already rinsing potatoes in the sink. The steam from the kettle curled toward the ceiling like smoke from a slow-burning candle. I had pulled myself together, or so I told myself. Face freshly washed, eyes red but hidden behind a smile. "Why are you up so early?" he asked, his voice still groggy. I glanced over my shoulder. It's your mom's birthday, remember? He blinked, then scratched his head. Right. Sorry. I guess I forgot. Of course he did. Daniel never cared much about birthdays, not even his own. But I remembered everything, his allergies, his favorite mug, the way he liked his eggs, slightly underdone. I remembered because I loved him. I shrugged, turning back to the sink. There's a lot to prepare. He stepped behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. You're amazing. Really. He kissed the top of my head. Let me know how I can help. I nodded. I would let him chop vegetables later. For now, I needed space. By late morning, the house smelled of rosemary and roasted garlic. I'd made herb chicken thighs, baked macaroni and cheese with crispy breadcrumbs, and started layering the chocolate cake she loved. I kept humming under my breath, some old tune from a movie we once watched together, trying to drown out the nervous pounding in my chest. The test was still in my pocket. No, not the pocket anymore. I had folded it into a napkin and tucked it deep into the drawer next to the silverware, wrapped in paper like a keepsake. I kept reaching for it unconsciously, fingers brushing over the drawer's edge as if to check that it was still there, still real. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not yet. I needed tonight to go perfectly. I needed the world to be still for just one evening. And then I would tell him, after the cake, after the guests, after the lights dimmed and the silence returned. That would be the moment. Around noon, Daniel finished hanging streamers in the dining room and plopped down on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Hey, I think this is enough, right? He called out. I peered from the kitchen, a paring knife in hand. Just about. I'll finish up the salad, and we should be good. He set his phone down and leaned back, arms stretched across the top of the sofa. You're seriously doing too much. My mom doesn't expect all this. I smiled, wiping my hands on a towel. Maybe not, but she deserves it. She's always been kind to me. Daniel nodded. Yeah, she loves you. Says you're the best thing that ever happened to me. I didn't answer. My throat tightened unexpectedly. I turned away and started slicing cucumbers, letting the rhythmic motion soothe the tremble in my fingers. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed again. He picked it up, checked it, then quickly locked the screen and tucked it into his pocket. I saw it, even if he thought I hadn't. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. At 3 p.m., his mom called. Anna, sweetheart, I hope it's not too much trouble. But would you mind if I brought my friend Linda with me? She just lost her husband last spring, and she's been feeling a little lonely. I didn't want to leave her alone today. Of course, I replied without hesitation. Bring whoever you like. We have plenty of food, and the house is warm. You're such a treasure, she said, sounding relieved. Thank you, darling. After I hung up, I leaned against the counter and let out a slow breath. Today wasn't just about me and my secret. It was about family, about making space for joy, for healing, for other people's losses too. As I stirred the dressing for the salad, I whispered to myself, just a few more hours, and then I'd tell him. Then everything would begin, or end. I didn't know which yet. By 5 o'clock, the dining room was glowing with soft yellow light, and the table was set with the good china we rarely used. I'd ironed the tablecloth earlier that morning, lit a cinnamon candle near the window, and folded cloth napkins into quiet little triangles. Everything was ready. Helen arrived with a gust of chilly wind and her signature bright red lipstick. Her gray coat still smelled faintly of lavender and cold air. Happy birthday, Mom, Daniel said as he opened the door and hugged her. His voice was warm, affectionate, familiar. She stepped inside and pulled me into a hug. Anna, my darling, you look radiant tonight. I smiled. So do you. I'm so glad you could come. Behind her trailed Linda, a petite woman with a soft voice and tired eyes, carrying a basket of fresh apples. From my backyard, she said gently. Thought you could use them. I thanked her and placed them on the counter. There was something comforting about her presence, like an old quilt. The house slowly filled with more voices, more coats and boots and laughter. Daniel's uncle showed up with a bottle of wine. One of his old high school teachers came by with a homemade pecan pie. The warmth in the room began to rise, like steam from a simmering pot. There was music playing softly, something jazzy and unobtrusive. I flitted from room to room, topping off drinks, checking on the oven, brushing crumbs from the counter with the sleeve of my sweater. Daniel helped at first. He moved chairs around, fetched extra forks, poured wine for the older guests. He was attentive, charming. He looked like the man I married. When dinner began, the room settled into that gentle clinking and murmuring rhythm of contentment. Dishes were passed, compliments were given, stories flowed like water. Someone praised the seasoning on the roast chicken. Helen leaned over and whispered, "You really are a miracle, Anna. I never thought I'd find a daughter-in-law like you." I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice caught behind my ribs. So I nodded and kept my hands busy folding the edges of a napkin. At one point, Linda turned to me and asked, "So, any little ones in your future? You too would make such lovely parents." The room went quiet for half a beat. Helen shot her a look, but I smiled softly and said, "Maybe sooner than you think." Daniel blinked. His hand, halfway to his wine glass, froze for a second. I met his gaze, steady and calm, just long enough to see something flicker in his eyes. Confusion, maybe fear. Then I turned away, letting the moment slide back into conversation. Daniel blinked, then looked at me. I met his gaze, let the moment hang there just long enough, and then turned away to refill a water glass. The conversation picked back up like nothing had happened, but something in the air shifted. Daniel seemed distracted after that, his laughter slightly delayed, his fork pushing food around his plate more than eating it. I caught him checking his phone under the table twice. And still, I said nothing. I moved through the evening like a dancer performing a routine I'd practiced 100 times. The smiles, the thank yous, the pouring of tea, the laughter at old stories. I laughed too. I leaned my head on Daniel's shoulder when his uncle made a joke. I complimented Linda's apple crumble. I toasted to Helen's health. But beneath every gesture was the steady thrum of the truth, like a distant heartbeat I could no longer ignore. As the night wore on and the candles burned lower, I felt the weight of the test still tucked away in the drawer. It was real. It was alive. And it was mine. The night had stretched longer than I anticipated. It was close to 8 when the laughter began to mellow, tapering into tired smiles and the occasional sigh after dessert. Most of the plates were empty, wine glasses half drunk and forgotten. The scent of roasted garlic and cinnamon still hung in the air. I had just finished clearing the last of the dessert plates when Daniel's phone buzzed again. The weight of the day pressed against my spine like dusk sinking into bone. I told myself I'd made it through the hardest part, and then his phone buzzed again. He checked the screen, frowned slightly, and stood up. "Excuse me," he said to no one in particular. "I need to take this. It's a client from the site." Helen, already flushed from 2 glasses of wine, waved him off. Work, work, work. Even on weekends. Daniel chuckled politely and stepped out of the dining room, disappearing into the small room beside the kitchen, the utility closet. Technically, it was a glorified storage space, but over the years it had also become his impromptu home office, a place he'd often slipped into when he needed quiet or, apparently, privacy. I had been calm all night, smiling through every crack, but in that moment I felt something sharper rise. Curiosity, dread, instinct. I needed to know. I didn't plan to follow. I really didn't, but something pulled me. Maybe it was the way he looked at his phone, or the way his voice had shifted when he stood. Or maybe it was just intuition, sharp and sudden, like a warning bell that finally found its volume. I walked quietly to the kitchen, pretending to tidy a tray. I paused by the wall, close enough to hear. His voice was low, but not low enough. The room had no insulation, and the hardwood floor beneath my feet seemed to carry sound like water. No, she doesn't know. She has no idea. She's still clinging to this fantasy, thinking we're fine. Silence, then a soft chuckle. I'm tired, Britt. Tired of pretending. The small talk, the fake smiles. I can't keep doing this much longer. Britt, my chest tightened. I just need to get through this weekend. It's her mother-in-law's birthday. I mean, come on. How would it look if I bailed now? Another pause. He lowered his voice, but I still heard the words as if they were etched into the air. 1 more month. That's all. Then I'll tell her. I'll say the marriage just doesn't work anymore, that we grew apart. She'll believe that. She always believes me. I stopped breathing. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Everything inside me screamed to run, but my feet wouldn't move. She's not a bad person. Just soft. She won't fight. That's the kind of person she is. She'll cry maybe, but eventually she'll let go. My eyes stung. There it was. The truth unvarnished. He wasn't planning to fix things. He wasn't struggling with guilt. He was waiting, conveniently, carefully, plotting the softest landing for himself while ripping the ground from beneath me. I stepped back too quickly. The floorboard beneath me groaned. I froze. Inside the room, his voice hushed. I waited, heart thudding like a war drum, praying he wouldn't open the door. He didn't. He resumed speaking, quieter now, a murmur I couldn't make out. But it didn't matter. I had heard enough. I turned around, walked back through the kitchen, and picked up the teapot with shaking hands. He came back 5 minutes later, smiling like nothing had happened. And I smiled too, because that's what soft people do. They smile even as they bleed. When I stepped back into the dining room, no one noticed the change in me. Not the tremble in my hands, nor the way my voice faltered slightly when I asked who wanted more tea. The candles had burned low. The warmth in the room had taken on a hazy softness, like a dream fading at its edges. Laughter echoed faintly, as though it came from somewhere far away. I sat beside Helen again, folding my hands in my lap. Daniel returned shortly after me, his smile intact, his charm undisturbed. "Client," he said with a sheepish shrug. "Last-minute supply question." Helen rolled her eyes playfully. "Always in demand." He winked at her, then poured himself another glass of wine. I watched him from across the table. I looked at the way his lips curved in a half-smile, the way he gestured when he spoke. His voice carried with the same ease, the same warmth, the same lie. How did he do it so effortlessly? I kept telling myself to hold on just until the guests were gone, just until the door clicked shut and we were alone. Then I would ask the questions. Then I would show him the pieces of my broken heart, still soft and beating in my hands. But for now, I played the role. I passed the bread. I complimented the crumble. I laughed at the memory of Helen's famous 4th of July barbecue disaster, even though I wasn't there that year. I touched Daniel's arm when someone teased him about his high school hair. Every word I spoke felt like chalk on my tongue. When Helen finally stood to gather her coat, I followed her to the door and helped wrap her scarf around her neck. "You outdid yourself tonight," she said, cupping my face with her gloved hands. "You're the glue holding this family together." I almost broke then, but I didn't. I smiled and whispered happy birthday and kissed her cheek. The others trickled out slowly. Linda gave me a tired smile and a squeeze of the shoulder. Daniel chatted at the doorway, still the perfect host, and I stood behind him waiting. When the last guest left and the door clicked shut, the silence wrapped around us like fog. Daniel turned to me, rubbing his hands together. "Well, that went well, huh?" I nodded. They all seemed happy. He stepped closer and slung an arm around my shoulders. "You were amazing tonight. Really." I pulled away before he could kiss me. My skin burned where he'd touched it. "Something wrong?" he asked, brows furrowing. "No," I said quickly. "Just tired." He tilted his head, watching me. You sure? I hesitated. His eyes held something between curiosity and calculation. Then he smiled. All right, but before you crash, come on. What was the big surprise you were teasing me with all day? My mouth opened and then closed again. The test, the joy, the moment I had imagined all week playing out under candlelight and soft music, it was gone now. I shook my head slowly. Not tonight. He raised an eyebrow. Why not? I'm just really exhausted, Daniel. He studied me for a beat too long, then nodded. Okay, tomorrow then. I turned away, pretending to adjust the dishes on the table. Maybe. It was the first time I lied to him. A small lie, perhaps, but it felt enormous in my mouth, heavy, sharp, like the beginning of something irreversible. I went to bed alone that night, curling into the cold side of the mattress. He came in half an hour later, humming the football score under his breath, sliding under the covers without noticing the space between us. He fell asleep in minutes, and I lay there, eyes wide open, listening to the quiet rhythm of a man's breath who had already left me long before he ever walked out the door. The next morning arrived without permission. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of a half-dream where nothing felt solid. I watched the shadows on the ceiling stretch and shift as the sun climbed higher. Daniel's breathing beside me was slow and steady, like always. It was a sound I used to find comforting. Now, I wasn't sure what it was anymore. At some point, he stirred and sat up. I've got to head to the site early, he mumbled, already reaching for his phone. Inspections are today. I nodded from the other side of the bed, the blanket pulled up to my chin. Okay. He kissed my cheek, a light, habitual gesture, then went to shower. His phone remained on the nightstand, buzzing once, then again. I didn't move at first. My fingers curled into the sheet, heart thudding against my ribs. I wasn't the kind of woman who checked her husband's phone. But then again, I hadn't thought I was the kind of woman he could betray either. I sat up slowly, every motion deliberate. The screen lit up again. Brittany, good morning, my love. I missed you last night. How did the party go? The breath left my body. My fingers hovered over the screen. I knew the passcode. Of course I did. It was the same for everything, our anniversary date. For numbers that once held meaning. Now just keys to a different reality. I entered them. The phone unlocked. The text thread was right there, like a hallway lined with broken mirrors. Message after message. Some playful, some intimate, all full of a world I had no part in. Brittany, I can't wait to start looking at places together. Daniel, soon. I promise. After Mom's birthday. Brittany, she won't make this difficult, will she? You said she's not the type. Daniel, she's not. She'll cry, but she won't fight me. My vision blurred. I scrolled further, past declarations of love, half-naked selfies, inside jokes. There were photos of restaurants I'd never been to, mentions of shows I hadn't watched, venues they planned to visit, a life already unfolding without me in it. I locked the phone and set it down. My hands were shaking, but my face was calm, empty. Daniel emerged from the bathroom a few minutes later, towel around his waist, humming to himself. He smiled at me like nothing had happened. Coffee? I nodded. He walked past me, kissed the top of my head, and didn't notice how stiff I sat. While he made his coffee, I walked into our bedroom and opened his closet. His jacket from last night still hung over the chair. Something peeked out of the inner pocket, a small folded slip of paper. I pulled it free. 2 theater tickets. Anna Karenina. Front row. My favorite play. The show had been 2 nights ago, the night he said he worked late. I opened the drawer of his nightstand and found a tiny velvet box tucked beneath receipts and charger cords. Inside was a ring. Not my size. Not my taste. A delicate band with a sapphire set in silver. The tag was still attached. I stared at it for a long moment, then closed the box. On the bathroom counter, I found a single strand of long, golden hair clinging to the edge of his towel. My own hair was dark and wavy. Brittany's, I now knew, was blonde. Everything in me went still. I returned to the kitchen before he finished his first cup of coffee. His phone was right where I left it. The jacket, the box, the tickets, untouched. Nothing was out of place, except me. I had been pulled out of my life and dropped into someone else's, and I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror anymore. I needed air, real air, not the stale kind that hung in kitchens or bedrooms where too many things had been left unsaid. By noon, I'd washed the dishes, changed the bed sheets, and folded a load of laundry without knowing how I got from one task to the next. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just moved, like a ghost passing through her own house. Around 1:30, I finally called Caroline. She picked up on the second ring, her voice sleepy but familiar. "Anna? Everything okay?" "I need to see you," I said. My voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. "Tell me where," she replied, no hesitation. "I'll come." "No," I said quickly. "Meet me at Maple and Ivy. 1 o'clock. Please." It was our place, quiet, old-fashioned, tucked on a sleepy corner near the library. The kind of cafe that still served tea in porcelain cups and pies on mismatched floral plates. By the time I arrived, Caroline was already seated by the window, her coat still draped over the back of the chair, her face drawn with concern. She stood the moment she saw me, arms outstretched. I didn't expect to cry, but the moment she held me, something inside cracked. Just a little. We sat. The waitress came and went. We ordered lemon tea and blueberry pie. Neither of us touched it. What happened? Caroline asked gently, her hand resting over mine. And so I told her. Everything. From the morning I woke up sick, to the test, the party, the closet, the phone, the blonde hair on my towel. I told her about the ring, the tickets, the messages. I spoke in a quiet monotone, afraid that if I let feeling into my words, they'd fall apart. My hands trembled slightly as I talked, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. If I stopped, I'd collapse. Caroline listened in silence. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her eyes well up once, just for a moment. When I finally finished, she sat back and exhaled slowly, like someone surfacing from deep underwater. "I need to tell you something," she said carefully, "and I hate that I didn't tell you sooner." I looked at her. My chest tightened. "What?" "I saw them," she whispered, "about a month ago, outside the shopping center on Beacon Street." The words hit like a slow bruise. "I wasn't sure it was him at first," she went on. "He was facing away, and I thought maybe it's someone else. Maybe it's innocent. They were by the jewelry store." He put his arm around her waist. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't respond. Not right away. She reached for my hand. I didn't say anything because I thought, if I'm wrong, I'll break something that can't be fixed. And if I'm right, I didn't want to be the reason you lost what you had. A silence settled between us. Outside the window, leaves danced down the street in golden spirals. "You're not the reason," I said finally. "He is." She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'm so sorry." I squeezed her hand. I would have done the same. For a while, we just sat there, two women in a booth with cold tea and untouched pie, holding the fragile remains of a marriage neither of us believed in anymore. Then Caroline said softly, "What are you going to do?" I looked down at my belly, resting one hand lightly over it. "I'm going to keep the baby." Her eyes widened slightly. "Even after everything?" I nodded. "Especially after everything. This child didn't ask for any of this, but they're mine, and they're a beginning, not an end." Caroline's voice broke. "You're stronger than you know, Anna." Maybe. Or maybe I'd just run out of ways to stay silent. I went home before the sun dipped below the rooftops. The sky was still blue, but already fading, like the last page of a letter no one would ever finish. Inside, the house was quiet. Daniel wasn't back yet. I had time. I moved slowly through the kitchen, wiping down the counters, setting 2 plates on the table like I'd done 1,000 times before. But tonight, I lit the candles, the ones we used for anniversaries or those rare nights when we remembered we used to be in love. I cooked dinner, not out of duty or affection, but for closure. His favorite, pan-seared trout, lemon-roasted potatoes, green beans with slivered almonds. A farewell in the language he understood best. Food, care, familiarity. When everything was ready, I turned off the overhead light, leaving only the soft flicker of candlelight and the hum of the refrigerator. I stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the world blur into evening. The front door opened at 7:52 p.m. Anna, he called out, stepping inside. Smells incredible in here. What's the occasion? He walked into the kitchen and stopped when he saw the table. The candles, the napkins folded into quiet triangles. He blinked. I turned to him slowly. Sit down. Something in my voice made him pause. He studied me, really studied me, for the first time in what felt like months. Then, cautiously, he pulled out a chair and sat. I joined him, poured him wine, served the food. Not a word exchanged. He took a bite. This is amazing, he said softly. You always know how to make things special. I looked at him for a long time. My hands were steady. My voice didn't shake. I know about Brittany. The fork slipped from his hand, clinking loudly against the plate. His eyes widened. What? I didn't repeat myself. He opened his mouth, then closed it, ran a hand through his hair. Anna, wait, I can explain. No, I cut in, voice low. Don't explain. Just tell the truth. His shoulders slumped. The mask he wore cracked at the edges. How long? I asked. He didn't lie. 8 months. I looked down at my plate. I hadn't touched a single bite. And you were going to leave me after your mom's birthday. He winced. I was waiting for the right time. There's never a right time to betray someone. He reached across the table, but I pulled my hands back. I wasn't planning this, he said. It just happened. I almost laughed. You bought her a ring. He blinked. You took her to see Anna Karenina 2 nights ago. You used our anniversary as your phone password. Do you even hear yourself, Daniel? His mouth opened again, but I didn't give him the chance. I was going to tell you something too, I said, almost a whisper. The night of the party. It was meant to be a surprise. He looked confused. What? I placed both hands on the table, palms flat. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed felt bottomless. He stared at me, unmoving. Pregnant? Yes. His face paled. Are you sure? I saw it with my own eyes. 2 lines. He looked like he was about to be sick. Anna, this changes everything. No, I said, standing slowly. It doesn't. It just makes everything harder. Please, he stood too, reaching for me. We can work through this. I'll leave Brittany. I'll fix this. We'll raise the baby together. You had 8 months, I said, stepping away. You didn't fix anything then. You won't now. Tears welled in his eyes. I made a mistake. No, I said, voice steady, almost kind. You made a choice. He sank back into his chair, hands in his hair. I blew out the candles one by one. In the darkness, I finally exhaled. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. I didn't need it. The house was still, the kind of quiet that follows a storm. Daniel had left early for work, or so I assumed. We didn't speak after dinner. He'd gone to the guest room, and I hadn't heard him leave. I stood at the window, one hand wrapped around a mug of lukewarm tea. Outside, the leaves had begun to fall in earnest. Brookline was turning gold and rust, the sidewalks covered in crisp remnants of a season changing. It felt appropriate. After I dressed, I pulled our wedding photos from the wall. There weren't many. 1 above the bed, 2 in the hallway, a framed invitation on the bookshelf. I took them down carefully, placing them face down on the dining table. I didn't rip them. I didn't burn anything. I simply removed the illusion of permanence. I tucked the photos into a drawer and covered them with a scarf. A gesture, small but necessary, like sealing a chapter with quiet reverence. I left the house just after 9, walked to the courthouse with my coat buttoned up and my breath curling in the cold air. The clerk behind the desk didn't ask questions, just handed me the form, pointed out the lines I needed to sign. "Reason for divorce?" she asked, almost absently. "Infidelity," I replied. She nodded. When I left the building, I stood on the courthouse steps and looked up at the sky. It was overcast. The clouds looked heavy but undecided, like they hadn't made up their minds about whether to rain. I understood that feeling. Back home, the house felt lighter somehow, as if the walls had exhaled. I changed the sheets again, cleaned the silverware drawer, vacuumed the corners I usually ignored. It wasn't about cleanliness, it was about claiming space, making the house mine again, ours, because I wasn't alone. That afternoon, I sat on the couch with one hand resting gently over my belly. The room was silent except for the soft ticking of the clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Under my palm, I imagined a tiny heartbeat, steady, brave, untouched by betrayal. "You didn't ask to be here," I whispered, "but I'm so glad you are." I didn't know what the future would look like. I didn't have a plan beyond tomorrow, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I would protect this child with everything I had, not out of spite, not out of desperation, but because love, real love, doesn't come with conditions, and I finally understood that I deserved it too. That night, as I lay alone in bed, the space beside me empty and undisturbed, I felt something shift deep within me. A quiet strength, a new beginning. I had lost a husband, but I had found something far more powerful. I had found the courage to choose myself, and that I realized was enough.